Princess Celestia, the Changeling Queen, Chapter 7, Part 2. The Throne Room. The Throne Hall was the biggest cavern in the hive. It was long and had a very high ceiling secured by a mat of tree roots. Although we had no foreign dignitaries to impress, it served well to remind most changelings of my mother's might. As I entered the throne room, disguised as a normal drone, I was shocked to see it was packed with 500 changelings. Forcing myself to breathe normally, I hefted my chosen weapon, a 6-foot-long halberd. Slowly, I pushed my way through the horde of changelings that were inside the hall and was confronted with a sight that I never would have dreamed of.
"What have you done, Chrysalis?"
demanded Camellia. My mother sat calmly on her throne of black obsidian, in spite of the poleaxes pointed to her throat. At the base of the throne, separated from my mother by a circle of traitorous changelings, was my sister. She had a calm expression, and was carrying a long iron-shafted spear with her magic.
"I am holding you hostage,"
explained Chrysalis, tone level but eyes hard as her carapace. My mother's eyes narrowed as she snarled. I blinked. Where were my mother's guards? I glanced around the foot of the throne and saw chevaliers that looked as if they had fallen asleep.
"Hypnosis is forbidden unless a life or death situation. How dare you use it upon your own kind? Have you learned nothing from what I taught you?"
said my mother with a snarl.
"You've taught me plenty, Mother, but I've realized something more important. Sometimes certain actions must be undertaken for the greater good. Now, Mother, all you have to do is give me the link to the entire hive. After that, I'll release you,"
said Chrysalis. Camelia's eyes widened at Chrysalis's statements.
"Is this about your younger sister? Alternia was going to leave. What does she have to do with this?" "Oh, I'd be lying if I said that she had nothing to do with this, but the fault is yours. You've let your love for Alternia and for my sisters make you soft. You want to talk to the pony princesses, open diplomatic relations, and reveal our race to the world. We live by deception, Mother. We were built to lie. We excel in this life and cannot live in any other way,"
declared Chrysalis. If I had been surprised by Chrysalis's revelation, I was far more shocked by what happened next. My mother glared back at Chrysalis, who stepped back, and I think I did too, for I had never seen my mother so angry. Though Camellia remained motionless, she suddenly towered over the changelings in the hall. Her eyes were narrowed, sharp, and flashing with rage. Yet there seemed to be a dejected tone to her curse.
"Then I've failed you and doomed our hive. Your misplaced faith in the superiority of our species has blinded you to the future. One day, you will be wondering why you did not listen to me. You must forsake this path, Chrysalis, or you will be punished." "Punished by whom, Mother? Alternia? My soldiers should have restrained her by now,"
stammered Chrysalis. As my mother replied, her words fell like hammer blows on an anvil, each blow echoing through the space of the hall.
"Mark my words, Chrysalis. If you refuse to change with this world, you will doom yourself and any changeling foolish to follow you."
At that moment, I dropped my disguise and cast a portal. In a roar of flames, I stepped out next to my mother and with a blast of magic, took out the guards who dared to point their spears at her. Chrysalis was so shocked that she barely reacted as my horn glowed and I hefted my weapon.
"Surrender, Chrysalis!"
I roared.
"Never!"
she screamed and drove the point of her spear towards my face. Flapping hard with my wings, I saw the weapon cut past my cheek.
"Then you leave me no choice but to defeat you!"
I brought my halberd crashing upon Chrysalis's head. She just managed to raise her spear to stop its descent. Meanwhile, my changelings who had been waiting in the adjacent rooms rushed into the hall. Buzzing wings filled the air as they threw themselves upon Chrysalis's changelings. The clangs of clashing weapons and howling battle cries filled my ears, but I only had eyes for the Changeling Queen in front of me. Chrysalis let her spear's tip sway side to side like a coiled snake ready to strike. I waited, my halberd shaft held diagonally. Mockingly, the spear danced forward and then flew back. I held my breath in anticipation, but dared not to react to the fiend. Out of nowhere, Chrysalis lunged, her spear cutting forward, seeking blood. Stepping backwards, I deflected the strike with the haft of my weapon. I then whirled my halberd through the air in a slash at her head. Chrysalis, her lips twisted in a sneer, lowered her head and ducked under my swing. Raising her head once more, she snorted at me.
"Sister, do you really think that you can beat me?"
giggled Chrysalis. She charged forward once again, her spear arching towards my head. Gritting my teeth, I raised my halberd and saw sparks flying as the spear hit my weapon's head.
"I see no sister in front of me, traitor!"
I hissed. I saw Chrysalis's eyes widen. As fast as I could, I channeled my will into my horn and released it. Flames scorched the air in front of me as a crack filled the hall. Chrysalis bounced across the hall like a ball and smashed into the wall so hard it collapsed upon her in a cloud of dust. I stepped forward towards the cloud and waited to see if she would come out. She emerged, coughing and covered in debris.
Alternia, please! You have to understand! Mother— Oh, you dare call her mother? She raised us, fed us, and trained us! We owe her everything! Yet you repay her with a coup!
I roared. Infuriated, I galloped forward, swinging my halberd down like a hammer. Chrysalis's eyes widened as she leapt to the side. A moment later, my halberd ripped through the space where she had just stood. I began to turn to follow up my attack, but found the breath knocked out of me as I was met with the iron-shod butt of her spear. I gasped and staggered backwards, trying to get as far away from my enemy as possible. Yet, Chrysalis didn't attack. Instead, she spoke.
Mother has gone mad. If she reveals our species to the ponies, there will be nowhere that we can hide. She thinks that we will be welcomed openly as allies and friends, but she's wrong. Have you heard of what the ponies did to the Wendigos, Discord, and Sombra? They'll have no love for anything that is not a pony.
I listened to my sister, my eyes narrowed. When she finished, I shook my head in disbelief and just sneered at her.
And do you honestly think that this will solve the problem? Don't try to deceive me, Chrysalis. All you want is Mother's throne.
I lunged on the last word of my rebuttal, and the spear tip of my halberd lanced towards her. She managed to parry the blow, but I continued to charge, head held low, and horn tip pointed to her carapace. Dropping her head down, Chrysalis slammed her horn against mine, sending vibrations through my vision. Eye to eye, horns locked, weapons pressed together, we strained against each other, struggling to find additional purchase onto the floor. I could hear her gasping breaths and see the dust and sweat onto her carapace.
Of course I want her throne! I want to show her that I can lead this hive better than her, and I want her to be proud of me!
Rasped Chrysalis. I blinked, shocked at her declaration, and suddenly felt the pressure at my forehead building up. I found myself sliding, my hooves unable to grip the earthen floor as Chrysalis slowly stepped forward. I strained against her, forcing my hooves against the ground, but I continued to be pushed towards the looming wall. With every muscle in my neck, I wrenched my head away, breaking the lock. As I scurried away, Chrysalis immediately sent her spear chasing after me. With great effort, I raised a shield of magic, hoping for some respite. To my horror, the spear gave off a turquoise glow, and passed through the shield like it never even existed. Panic lent to the speed of my retreat, but it was to no avail. I saw the spear nearing my chest and felt the cold pinpoint of the weapon touch my chest. Desperate, I opened a portal and disappeared. My vision briefly turned black as I went through the darkness of the doorway and relaxed. When I stepped out, I froze with terror as I saw the spear flying towards me. Chrysalis had anticipated where I was going to escape and thrown her weapon to the location. I raised my halberd, but my weapon, once so light, now weighed like a boulder. I held my breath and closed my eyes, bracing myself for whatever death had in store for me. The expected pain, the impact, never even came. I felt nothing. I heard nothing, as well. The sounds of battle had suddenly grown silent.
No!
Screamed a voice filled with anguish and disbelief, emotions I had rarely seen from Chrysalis. But why was she screaming? Wasn't I dead? Hesitantly, I relaxed my cheeks and eyelids and opened my eyes. A tall, slender, dark form stood in front of me. A crown antenna sat regally on her head. It was my mother, her transparent wings lifted like protective walls. Protruding from the chitin of her chest was the shaft of Chrysalis's spear. At that moment, I couldn't breathe. It seemed like time had stopped. Chrysalis's cries had been muffled to buzzing, incoherent static. My vision blurred as my mother collapsed to the ground. I raced forward, hooves clattering against the floor, and threw myself to her side. An effort that seemed to take forever. I knew it was futile, but I cast a healing spell anyway. My mother didn't even say a word. Her eyes creased and the corners of her mouth turned upwards in a smile. It was a wide smile, but one that would not banish my tears. She then closed her eyes and sighed. With that sigh, all of my warmth left my body. I felt numb, cold. There was nothing I could hear or feel. Everything I saw was my mother's still expression and her final smile. I don't know how long I sat. What I do know is that something began to burn within me. The hot fury of anger coursed in my veins. I felt it lash at myself for making my mother save me, for the events that brought about this tragedy. Part of me was racked in the limbo of denial, but it was grief that weighed down on my chest like an unstoppable force and gripped my throat like a vice. All that pressure, all of my pent-up emotions, I had to release it, and I knew who I would direct it to. I turned and saw Chrysalis, staring at me and my mother, her eyes filled with tears, yet they were sharp and narrowed. Those pinpricks were filled with hate and jealousy. We both knew what was going to happen next.
Murderer!
I charged, slashing my weapon wildly, aiming at my enemy's neck. Chrysalis rolled under my weapon, but cried out as my halberd cut off the tip of her ear. Standing tall, her horn glowed and I felt myself rising into the air and then propelled into the ground. Blinking away the pain, I struggled back up, blinking tears away from my eyes, and growled. Chrysalis had retrieved her spear from my mother's corpse and was hurtling it towards me. I grimaced and met her spear with my weapon's hilt.
Are you happy now, Chrysalis? Mother is dead! The throne is yours!
My one sister let out a wail of anguish and flung her spear at my neck. I dodged it, but winced as the spear cut across my neck.
Shut up, shut up, shut up! This wasn't supposed to happen!
Wailed Chrysalis.
Of course it wasn't!
I sobbed. I swung my halberd and sank it into her shoulder, causing a spew of green blood. She retaliated with a stab to my hoof that made me wince. I returned with a cut to her face, and she slammed me into the wall of the hall as we grappled with one another hoof and fang. We whirled, punched and bucked at each other, cracking our carapaces and drawing each other's blood. It was like a brawl between young changelings, uncontrolled and uncoordinated. It was like how she and I used to fight. But that was when we fought for fun, not for the throne.
Why did Mother love you so much? What did you do to make Mother love you so much? Why did you kill her?
Screamed Chrysalis. My only response was a snarl, and to pounce forward, seizing her throat with my jaws. Screaming, Chrysalis pounded my back and mauled my wings with her hooves and fangs. They ached, but they couldn't quell my desire for revenge, nor compare to the loss of my mother. Desperate, Chrysalis ripped me from her throat with her magic, sending me flying away from her. That was when she got lucky. I was slammed into the ground, face first, and rolled several times before coming to a rest on my side. Shaking my head, I moved my legs and gasped as a wave of pain shot up from my hooves. I looked down and to my dismay and revulsion, saw both of my front hooves were bent where they should not be bent. The carapace was shattered and cracked. My blood coursed from these new springs of pain like sickening rivers. I looked up. Chrysalis was standing unsteadily, a hoof prodding experimentally at the ripped and torn chitin of her throat.
What's the matter, Alternia? Having trouble getting up?
Rasped Chrysalis. As I gazed up towards Chrysalis, panic filled my heart. My rear hooves scrabbled uselessly at the ground in a futile attempt to rise. All of my earlier rage was replaced by fear, which grew with every step of Chrysalis's advance. I had to get away, but my strength had left with my anger and Chrysalis was too close. That was when Chrysalis was tackled by 4 changeling drones. Their combined weight threw her to the ground and pinned her. 2 chevaliers suddenly appeared beside me, and both were covered in scrapes and their carapaces were scored with wounds. But they lifted me up on their shoulders.
Milady, can you still teleport?
Asked one of them. I shook my head and they nodded.
Alright, we'll teleport you to the pony castle. You can disguise yourself as a pony and they'll heal you up in no time.
At that, my eyes widened.
No, wait, no, I can't abandon you!
Despite my plea, the 2 changelings ignored me and their horns began to glow.
Goodbye, milady,
said one of them. Emerald flames rose around me. Through the curtain of fire, I saw Chrysalis had gotten free. She had shaken off the 4 drones and was charging at us, her spear gripped awkwardly in her hooves. I knew that she was too far away to do anything, but then my heart sank when she threw her spear. I shouted a cry, but my 2 chevaliers were too busy with the spell. I could do nothing else but stare in alarm at the plunging spear tip. As my vision turned into shimmering green, I felt the spear pierce my chitin, slice into my flesh, and tear into my stomach. Agony blossomed in my midsection, along with the despair that I was going to die. Talk about a whole bunch of action and a hell of a lot of suspense. Jesus Christ. All that shit went wrong so damn quick. Anyway, let's make things right and let's get on to our mighty donators. Top donators, Dash of Evergreen, Peter Coulthard, J Tinman, Darkside, and Ponyman. Courier Crucii, Strix, Delta Omega, Runescythe 9852, Dospo, Ronnie Dragonwolf, Hunter Norman, Austin Roland, Secret Moon, Tall Russia, The Toilet Snake, Sword Brethren Mordred, Cerberus, Goulash Eating Hazar, Ronin Wandering, Enderai 63, Random Person Man Guy, Starlight Glimmer, Squiddy Boy, David D. Sanchez, Soul Dragon, Gaggy, Trey, Shadow Drake, Joe Piercy, Alex F., Rainbow Dash, TLK Anderson, TV Killer, John Becker, Leon Reynolds, Raven Speedster, Zach Rakow, Mr. ECU, and Leslie Prickett. Thank you all very much for watching this video. Live life to the fullest, and protect your family well.